Well, here we go, episode 36. And I hope those of you who do listen regularly to the podcast have taken a look at the Boys Club and also all the great work that Ben Madden is doing. And Russell, bloody hell, that story unpicked, didn't it? From
I know.
fine and country selling houses to gangsters in East London. I thought it was in an episode of Mobland for a moment.
I know, and the comparison between being a gangster and being an estate agent. I've just got to take a moment to say that the people that come onto this podcast and are candid and honest about their lives, their backgrounds, they tell some very personal stories that, you know, most people perhaps wouldn't want to tell. But, you know, Ben is just another example in 35 episodes, and obviously we'll come to episode 36 in a sec, of someone that has just kind of warts and all told it as it is, by way of it hopefully being inspiring to others. And I just want to pay tribute and actually gratitude on behalf of Russ and I that people come on here. It's much less about blatant branch or business promotion and much more about the individual. And hopefully that I hope that's what people get out of watching this. It's something a bit different.
Yeah, and getting guests and having guests have come to us in many different ways. And you know, one of the great people that I work with at Rayner Personnel, Mornay Ackerman, has been saying to me, "You've got to get Geoff on the podcast." And so I'm really, really pleased to welcome Geoff Wilford to the podcast today. Welcome, Geoff.
Thanks, James. Nice to meet you both. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, because we've not met before.
No, we haven't. No. Love to meet you both.
We're not even connected on LinkedIn, by the way. I checked.
Are we not?
Oh, no.
Okay, well,
and I thought I was connected
Russell's
to most
connected
people.
to everyone. And if you unpick the 34 episodes we've had so far, we've had a big rush of self-employed agents. We've had lots of people that are pushing a new model or are talking about, you know, the future of a estate agency. We had Mark Lawrenson on talking about Beresford's traditional, but that's, you know, 10, 15 branches, everything. And I'm really excited to hear from the shop floor, you know, why, Geoff, you are absolutely wedded to the traditional model of a estate agency, 17 members of staff, and when all the noise around you is self-employed, self-employed, self-employed. So let's kick off there. Tell us a little bit about Wilford's.
Okay, lovely to meet you both. So I set Wilford's up 14 years ago along with my business partner Simon. We opened our first branch in Kensington, and we come from a corporate background. So we met at Foxtons, where we met Mornay as well. Worked at Foxtons, really enjoyed that for 6 years. Then I worked at Hamptons International for 2 years, set up two new offices for them. I think there's still a space, in answer to your question, for traditional offices. We still do have people walk into our shop from time to time. Admittedly, those numbers aren't what they used to be back in the day. But, you know, we had a potential client walk in last week. We were instructed to sell our house. It's now on the market with us. So, you know, that happened only on Friday last week. So it still happens, contrary to what some of the online-only agents would do.
Well, he's a big supporter of online over here. So, future.
Well, perhaps. Well, no, look, I was part of the original online estate agency revolution. I'm now a big supporter of the self-employed.
The death of a estate agency.
Yeah. Look, we had a good go, didn't we?
You did. You
someone
had a
had
great go.
Someone had to put best foot forward. I don't regret that at all, actually. But do you not think the high street estate agency is dead?
No, and the reason I can say that with such conviction is because, don't get me wrong, I don't think that we'd have no ambitions to open.
You've got 2 branches.
We've got 2 branches, and we're about to double. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, because we're going to double that number this calendar year.
So you can open 2 more branches?
2 more branches. One in Aberville Road in the Aberville Village. Mm-hmm. We're already, at the risk of sounding conceited, the number 1 house selling agent in the Aberville Village. So we're going to kind of put our flag in the ground there and cement.
With a physical presence.
With a physical presence. We've got a lovely corner shop that's about to open in July. The builder in there now doing the refurbishment. And then we've got another one. We agreed terms with the landlord last week. It will be in West London. That's all I can say for now until we've actually signed on the dotted line.
So you're committed to expanding your physical footprint.
The plan, Russell, when Simon and I played golf 14 years ago, we're both from humble backgrounds, which you can come on to in a bit if you want to. But we've both got successful uncles, and they both run their own businesses, or both did run their own businesses when they were, you know, working before they retired. So Simon and I played golf, and we said, you know, why don't we set up our own agency? I've got Malcolm Walker, who's the founder of Iceland to invest in us. We'll come on to that.
Malcolm in a minute.
And why don't we open 5 offices? You know, the digitalisation of everything was happening. Why don't we open 1 in central London, Kensington and Chelsea, 1 north, 1 south, 1 east, 1 west? You know, we're simple estate agents. Let's not overcomplicate things. 2 London from there, from those sort of 5 hubs. And then we'll sell it and both sail off in our respective dinghies. We were going to do all of that in 10 years. Here we are,
you're now 14
years in, and we only opened our second office 2 years ago. And it's fucking harder than it looks.
So why have you been so lazy about it, Geoff?
Well, it's just slacking, Russ, just, half days, 3 days a week.
Playing too much golf.
But I look at that, and we'll come back to the Leicestershire and moving to London shortly. But I look at that and think, right, at the moment, I'm being told it's taking 21 weeks for a residential transaction to go through. It's taking 26 weeks for a leasehold transaction to come through. So
they're not using Wilford's. Ours is more like 8 weeks to get a sale through. The key differentiator between ourselves and our competitors is the average length that someone's been an estate agent that works at Wilford's is 22 years. So Phil, who's brilliant, he's been an agent for 43 years in Southwest London.
And your team is all employed agents?
Yes.
Yeah. No self-employed?
There's a couple of guys that are more sort of part-time, that are consultants.
Right.
And we've got like and we've got a fractional FD and a fractional HR
But if
director.
you were to expand, so you've got an office in Kensington and let's say you want to expand outside of that area, you're going to do that by employing people rather than stealing ideas from the self-employed.
No, I'm not wedded to any of that. I'm quite happy to be flexible depending on the person's experience. I think you've got to be really flexible in this day and age. You guys know, Mornay, Russell, you guys know, and obviously you do as well. But with regards to employing people, you've got to be flexible. Yeah. So,
because I'm just staring at the losses that you're going to have to build up in that new branch before you start returning a profit. It must be a very calculated risk that you're going into that location, because you've got, the refurb costs, you've got the setup costs, you've got all the guaranteed salaries, and then 8 weeks, 12 weeks 8 weeks to exchange, 12 weeks when you might get paid. You're going to dig a big hole, and Russell's convinced there's no profit in basically high street estate agency.
Well, there definitely is, but rather than us taking out in dividends, we're just rolling that into opening new branches. So we're not opening new limited companies with each branch. It's just Wilford's London Limited. And we're just, rather than having all of that as profit and dividends and giving 45% to the tax man, we're just expanding.
You're reinvesting it.
We're reinvesting it.
So what's the end game?
Good question. Depends what day of the week you talk to me on. If we're going really great guns and everything's brilliant, global domination. And if we're having a really shit day and I've got a client who's an absolute,
Where's John Ennis's number?
Where's John Ennis's number? Exactly. John took me out
Come
for
and buy
breakfast
me.
as soon as he joined Le Mans. Yeah, he was straight on it.
So no, seriously, what is it? What's the ambition? An exit, presumably? Is that what it's about?
Yeah, I guess
so. Or do you think it's a lifestyle business?
My 11-year-old daughter Clementine is constantly saying, "My name's above the door, and don't sell it, give it to me." But that aside, I think I'm 48, Simon's 48. We've got a good 10 years left in us, maybe longer. I worked in the Caribbean for 3 years. I was surrounded by entrepreneurs, some of whom had sold their businesses for tens, hundreds, billions of pounds. And the one thing in common, all these entrepreneurs are built in a very similar way. After about 2 years of lying on a beach and having a pina colada and having all their family and grandkids and everyone around them for 2 years, all bored to tears within 2 years. So
almost regretting exiting and now not having anything to do.
No, I don't think regretting exiting, but wanting another challenge. Yeah. Like, the idea of just lying on a beach sounds great. But when you've had a really lovely holiday, like I listened to the podcast recently, you've just come back from Mauritius. At the end of Mauritius, you were probably thinking, okay, I'm ready to go back now and sit next to
Where's
Russell.
Russell? Yeah, where's Russell?
Where's Russell? I'm missing Russell. Yeah, I mean, you're nearly holding hands. It's nice to see.
I wouldn't want to do it for 3 months, Mauritius. Yeah,
no, exactly.
You're right.
Exactly. And when I worked in the Caribbean, and we did work very hard, at the end of 3 years, I was desperate to come back to London, desperate to get back into the cut and thrust of city life.
Let's go back to that. So you're born in Leicester,
born in Melton Mowbray, little market town called Melton Mowbray, not far away from Grantham, where
Chris Watkins
lives. And fairly humble background. Dad's a brilliant salesman. He's sold furniture all of his life. Mum owned a health food shop. So she was entrepreneurial, as was her father.
And your uncle was doing...
Uncle set up a PR agency called Harvard PR.
Okay.
So Uncle Mike used to live in Staines. No one knew where Staines was until Ali G came out. The Staines massive. Yeah. Massive house in Staines on the river. Kids both went to Marlborough. Always had brand new Mercedes on the driveway. So we go to Uncle Mike's, which was near London, which from a little market town in Melton Mowbray. That was always quite exciting in its own right. But it'd be like, Mike, how do you get the trappings of all this success? And he used to say to me, if you want to get into sort of following in my footsteps, then advertising and PR, work for a local newspaper or a newspaper, sell advertising space, then work for an advertising agency, work your way up from account exec to account manager to account director. He then at 40 took with him the Sega account, which was a big account in the 1980s. set up Harvard PR with a couple of his mates, sold it when he was 50, rode off into the sunset. So I was like, brilliant, Mike, I'm going to follow your footsteps. So I worked for the Melton Times newspaper, doing cold calling, worked for the Birmingham Post and Mail in the Midlands.
Selling advertising,
literally just, phone calls for about a year. Fell out with my boss, which at the time, my mum was like, oh my God, you've been sacked. That's really embarrassing. What are you going to do? And I moved down to London like Dick Whittington without a pot to piss in, and slept on my sister's couch in Clapham. And I was going around buying campaign magazine, the marketing campaign, looking for jobs in marketing, going to Soho for job interviews. But my heart wasn't really in it. And then I remember coming back from a job interview and flicking through the Evening Standard when I was on the tube going back to Clapham South. And there was the advert, which kind of changed my destiny, really. It was a guy jumping out of
an aeroplane. Oh, I remember that advert, yes.
Foxtons, come and join us. Year one, OTE, 30 grand. Year two, 50 grand. Year three, 80 grand and a BMW. And I got home and I said to my sister, I'm going to go for this. And she said, well, before you do, Mary Robinson, who's a really good friend of my sister's, works at Foxtons. She runs the Battersea office. I'll give her a call. Mary came round that evening in a convertible Mercedes, which was very impressive for me. It was like 22, just down from little old Melton Mowbray. And, the lid came down as she pulled up outside. Hi, I'm Mary. And she was brilliant. I can get you straight into Pete Rollins. Deep voice. She did, didn't she? Yeah, yeah. And she said, I can get you straight in to see Pete Rollins. So the bit of advice she gave me when Pete interviews you is don't sit still. So for like a minute, be relaxed, then sit up and be attentive. So I just did that for about 20 minutes with Pete, and he offered me the job. And at the time, Foxtons was quite elitist back in the late 90s.
And how many offices did they have at the time?
Six.
So just six offices.
Yeah, and they wedged me in between Chris Gooch.
Now 60.
Now 60. When I left in 2005, there was 16. Yeah. So it did go through, pretty big growth.
So you were there for the whole John Hunt era, because he exited in 2008-9, I think.
I think he founded it in 81. I left in 2005, and he sold it in 2007.
To BC Partners. Yeah, because famously his timing was perfect. Although he says apparently that it was all luck, and if it had been another 2 or 3 weeks, financial crash, and that business would have been worth a slither of the 300 million I think he took off the table. What was he like?
He's worth billions.
He's worth billions. Million.
So was he a monster?
Yeah. No, not at all. He was lovely. He was you could tell he was
lovely. I've never heard him described as lovely. He was tough, right?
He was ex-military, so he was never tough with me. I never actually worked with him in the same office as him. He would just come in for morning meetings, and because at the risk of sounding conceited, I worked my way up from lowly neg to number one sales guy at the peak of my Foxtons career. He would pat me on the back and shake my hand and say, well done, Geoff, for making me, 450 grand this year, which is kind of what you needed to build back then to be.
And which branch were you in then?
Fulham predominantly.
And describe the Foxtons culture back then.
It was brilliant. If I had my 20s again, I would do it all over again. I know they've had some negative press recently, but I personally think that's just journalists who have got, column inches to fill.
That is journalists being way too mischievous and going out of their way to try and throw Foxtons under the bus.
Friend.
Can I just say, I think that was a disgraceful piece of journalism.
Yeah, I agree.
By Bloomberg.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They went hunting for bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They did. And it's a bit of a witch hunt. And, no company's perfect. And I think culturally, times have changed an awful lot from the 90s to where we are now. And I know that Guy Gittings, who's a brilliant operator and a friend of mine, he's gone in there and turned that ship around, and he's a phenomenal operator. But I love Foxtons. Most of my mates in London are through Foxtons.
But what was the culture back then? Because the next question will be whether you now manifest that culture within Wilford. So it was champagne popping, celebrating success, backslapping, and I say that with no criticism. I'm a massive fan of that kind of culture.
We watched Peter Rollins, didn't we, talk at the was it Property Franchise Group conference last year, maybe 2 years ago, and he was talking about Friday night finishing work, he had to drive to John Hunt's place out in Suffolk because there was a board meeting the following morning, and when you got there, you got a bowl of soup, and that was it. You remember, I got a bowl of soup, and then you'd be up in the morning for the board meeting, then drive all the way back, and your weekend was literally Saturday afternoon and Sunday, and then back in on.
I just
on
really
Monday,
admire what John built.
No brown in town.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no beards, no brown in town, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, when I loved it. I thought it was brilliant for a young lad from Leicestershire to move down there, to earn the money we were earning in the heyday of a estate agency, to meet the people that have now become really good friends. We've been ushers at each other's weddings and that sort of stuff. It was a brilliant experience. And we got a CV this morning, somebody who's a school leaver wants to join Wilford's. And I said, look, actually go off and get the training from somewhere like Hamptons or Foxtons, or go and do the corporate bit for 5 years and really get to know
And then come back.
Yeah, then come back.
So have you manifested any of the old Foxtons culture in
I'm
Wilford's?
still, rightly or wrongly, I'm still a workaholic. I mean, I still, I jump out of bed at 4:30 in the morning. I didn't when I was at Foxtons because I was in my 20s, so we were out on the piss.
You're just getting in.
We were out on the piss every night, and then sort of, I was presented with an alarm clock because I was the top sales guy, but I was the last one in the office every morning. And because John was very sort of ex-military, everyone had to be at their desk at 8:30 in the morning, and I'd come running in at 8:45. But I'd always be the last one out in the evening, so I'd work harder than anybody else. But I was just shit at getting up in the morning. So they presented me with an alarm clock in front of the whole company. My philosophy with regards to the guys and girls at Wilford's is, as long as the numbers are on the board at the end of the month, I'm happy. It's only if the numbers aren't there that I'll start going, guys, how can we help you? How can we support you? Why aren't you performing as well as we'd like you to? You're not going to hit your targets.
So you haven't brought forward the fixed diary of
None
no
of
appointments
that.
before.
None of that. We treat everybody like grown-ups. But I appreciate that back then, Foxtons was full of, I was one of them, a 21-year-old, 22-year-old. They needed that kind of regimented structure.
So you did Foxtons, good grounding, then
Great
Hamptons.
grounding. Yeah, Hamptons for 2 years.
So headhunted?
Headhunted by Sarah Graybro. She was a director at the time. She asked me to open a new office for them in Chiswick, which I did in 2004, 2005. That went really well. Then they asked me to open a new office for them in Notting Hill on Westbourne Grove. That went really well. And then Robin Patterson, who you may or may not know, sold Hamptons for about £40 million to Wheelock, who are based out in Thailand.
Did he then go into Sotheby's?
No. So he then basically invested a lot of money in the Caribbean. He bought 2 large plots of land, went into partnership with a hotelier who's originally from Sunderland called Mike Pemberton. Mike was a bit older than Robin. He was 73 when I was working for Mike 18 years ago. So he's still alive. He's in his 90s now. Mike and his ex-wife Lynn moved to Barbados in the 1960s and developed a lot of the hotels. I don't know if you've been to Barbados, but Glitter Bay, Royal Westmoreland, all these hotels. The Lone Star's a really lovely restaurant. It used to be a garage. Mike converted that from a garage into the hotel that it is. Into the restaurant that it is today. So worked for those 2 guys, and we were building a 4 Seasons hotel and selling 36 Four Seasons branded residences way back in 2005, 2006. And I was lucky enough to be plucked out of all the Hampton staff to basically work for Robin and relocated to the Caribbean.
So you moved over there?
Moved over there, lived out there.
Not a bad gig.
Yeah, I survived. It was tough, but I lived to tell the tale.
Take long to decide that one?
Yeah, about 3 minutes. No, I'd never been to the Caribbean, so I said, can you fly me out there and I'll have a look, just thinking that in itself would be quite a good gig, right? So they flew me out there for the weekend, flew me out business class, which was a novelty for me because I hadn't done that before. Landed, got picked up by a chauffeur-driven BMW. They put me in the Coral Reef Club Hotel, which is a really lovely hotel. They wined and dined me at the Cliff Restaurant, which used to be the nicest restaurant in Barbados. And I was literally like ringing my mum going, I haven't landed on my feet here.
I've done any work yet.
I think I've got the wrong guy. Like, what's going on? Moved out there, and the first guy to buy one of these villas was a chap called Lucian Grange, who I'd never heard of, but he's the CEO of Universal Music. Arguably the most powerful man in the music industry, manager of Amy Winehouse when she was alive, the Rolling Stones, Madonna, Take That.
Wow.
Now Taylor Swift, phenomenal businessman. So he bought villa number 1. He then called me.
How much was that?
$11.6 million.
$11.6 million. And when is this?
This is back in 2006,
long time ago.
7.
2006.
So what's that worth now?
2006.
What's that worth
well,
now?
I'll come on to that because it's actually worth nothing, and I'll explain why in a second.
Oh, wow.
So he then called me and said,
Here comes a soundbite.
Yeah.
Right, good.
yeah. I'm with a good friend of mine. We're staying at the Sandy Lane. Can you come and pick him up? You've probably heard of him. His name's Simon Cowell. So I was like, yeah, that's quite exciting. Drove down there to pick Simon up. He bought villa number 2, and then it was just a kind of who's who.
You picked him up and showed him around?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, lovely guy, really lovely guy, with his his then girlfriend Terry Seymour, and they were lovely. And they'd actually already been to Mike's house because that was the show home at Lang Bay for parties in previous years that they'd been to Barbados. And a lot of these guys, they love Barbados. They holiday there over Christmas. They love the Four Seasons because it's a global brand. So quite frankly, it was a great job to have.
Yeah.
Very lucky to be there. Long story
Taking
short,
candy from rich babies.
yeah. I sold $230 million worth of real estate off plan. And then the global financial crisis kicked in, and the Bank of Scotland, who were funding the whole project, pulled the rug from under our feet. I was a year away from being a multimillionaire at the age of 30. I'm 48 now.
Based on what? Because you had equity or just on commission?
I was on commission, purely on commission. They didn't use any agents globally. It was just me paid 0.5% directly.
Yep.
Of every sale.
Of every sale. and I sold 230 million, but there was another 170 million that was, going to be sold if the global financial crisis hadn't kicked in. So, 400 million, you do the math, that's a couple of million. Yeah. And back then you could buy an awful lot for a couple of million quid.
Yeah.
So I was like, I rented a villa called Goldeneye, 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms,
Goldeneye,
infinity swimming pool,
sharks in the swimming pool with a bridge over it that moved on a button,
stroking a cat.
Yeah. Geoff Bond, welcome to the villa.
Wow. And then 2008 hit.
And then 2008 hit, and I just thought, what a dick for wasting all of that money.
And so therefore demand diminished completely, presumably, and the deals couldn't be funded.
Everything stopped. Yeah. I got to work on the Monday morning. Lucian called me and said, "Is it true?" And I said, "Is what true?" He said that the site's closed down. I was like, "I don't know." And I got to work, and the gates were closed, and I'd been constructively dismissed along with all the other staff, and was added to a list of creditors.
Right.
And I guess, you could then get disgruntled by that and think, I'm owed a load of money. I'm going to get really upset about it. And obviously, initially, I was quite upset about it.
It wasn't their fault.
It wasn't their fault.
They were a consequence of the global financial crisis.
Exactly. And actually, it was a complete blessing, because doing transactions and business with the likes of these high-profile, high-net-worth clients made me realise I don't necessarily need Knight Frank or Savills above the door. Why don't I just put Wilfords above the door and go for it?
But just to piece that together, one of the people you sold a house to,
yes,
you used to work for.
Yeah, so Malcolm,
not that he would have known.
No, he didn't know. So Malcolm Walker, who's the founder and chairman of Iceland Foods, he came along, bought a villa from me. And when I discovered who he was and how he created his fortune, I said, actually, Malcolm, I used to work for you. I used to stack shelves in your Melton Mowbray branch when I was a kid.
Selling the prawn ring.
Yeah, exactly.
What did he say? Yeah, great, go and get me a coffee.
He was really lovely. And the really nice thing about doing business in the Caribbean is everybody's there with their kids, with their grandkids, with their Bermuda shorts on. It's such a lovely place to do business. You kind of get welcomed into their family as a trusted advisor. So when I moved back to London, I worked at One Hyde Park for the Candy Brothers for a very short period of time. And
which at the time was the most expensive flats and apartments in the world.
£150 million the penthouses were selling for.
Yeah. Which sold, right?
Sorry?
Which sold for that money.
Yeah, all of them sold, 4 of them, yeah. And so I set Wilfords up with Sir Malcolm's investment. He invested.
Can we just go back? Sorry, because you mentioned just now that $11.6 million then became zero. Tell us why that apartment, that villa,
the whole thing was finished and mothballed. So
no one ever moved in.
So nobody ever moved in. It's now been bought recently by another developer called Pendry.
So it stayed dormant for years.
It was this derelict. All these mega villas were basically monkeys, quite literally moved in.
17 years on, and it's only just been picked back up again.
It's taken 18 years. I mean, I could really go into the detail if you want me to, but it's quite complicated with regards to banks.
Another time, we'll have you back.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I just wanted to square that particular circle.
So sadly, it was a victim of the global financial crisis.
So why Wilfords and house? Okay, you didn't
come back and just buy it straight away, though. You went to work, didn't you?
But there's some psychology going on here, right? Which is not only are you in a position where you've got to go and do something, right?
Yeah.
So you've got no job anymore, so you've got to go and do something. But you've also been exposed to some of the most successful entrepreneurs on the planet.
Yes.
Which must have inspired you.
Very much so. Literally, if you go through the Sunday Times Rich List back in 2006, I met at least 20% of them. They were interested in these new
Was there
branded
one
residences.
thing you learned from those 20%? Was there anything you learned from those as individuals?
They're all so different, because some of them are sort of 3rd, 4th, 5th generation super
Is
wealthy.
it, I don't
Another
know,
self-made.
Some of them are self-made.
Don't
And
want to
I
put
think
words in your
there's-
mouth, but I don't know, tenacity, cool under pressure. I mean, is there something...
Well, some of them were lovely and were clearly worked very, very hard and were really gritty and really determined.
Who was the biggest arsehole?
Philip Green.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is famous for being a complete arsehole. Yeah. He was just a twat.
Yeah.
That's also his persona, isn't it?
Yeah, he lived up
but I think it's not persona.
He
really is.
lived up to his reputation very much so. But he wanted to buy 2 villas on the beach and knot them together to have a villa that was twice the size of everyone else's. Yeah. Tina, his wife, was lovely. We agreed terms, and the most surreal day of my working life as a little lad from Melton Mowbray that used to work on a fruit and vegetable stall was, she said, we want to show you our stone staircase on Lionheart in Monaco. So you need to come and see it. So Robin Patterson, my old boss, and I flew from Barbados to London to Nice. Nice on a helicopter around to Monaco, jumped on Lion
Just
Club.
to see a staircase?
To meet Simon Broomhill, who was the solicitor, to go through the contract. But she wanted us to do all of that to see the staircase, because she wanted that particular staircase mirroring in her Bayesian villa. Never got built in the end, so it didn't matter. But
so you land back in London, I think, right.
Land back in London, did One Hyde Park for a short period of time, really wanted to set up my own agency, called Malcolm and said, I want to set up my own agency. Spoke to a guy called Tim Buckley, who had set up Buckley's Estate Agents. He then sold that to Savills, took him out for lunch and said, Tim, what should I do? And he said, whatever you think it's going to cost you to set up an agency in London, double it, because you'll run out of cash. You know, that runway of cash is going to run out quite quickly.
I think that's very good advice.
Yeah.
Really good advice. So I'd done my numbers and I'd worked out that in 2011, when we conceived Wilford's, it was going to cost £250,000. He was like, double that, it's going to cost you £500,000.
Yeah.
I got like 50 grand in the bank. Who do I know that's wealthy? Who do I get on really well with? My mate Malcolm. Hi Malcolm, can you invest 400 grand in an estate agency? And he said, put a business plan together and come and see me tomorrow. The train leaves from London to come to Runcorn, where Iceland's head office is, at 6 o'clock in the morning. My driver will pick you up at 8:20. See you tomorrow. And now, obviously, with business podcasts being what they are, I now realise that he obviously gets people go up to him probably on a weekly basis, going, invest in me, invest in me. And his way of sorting out the wheat from the chaff is to give them...
Can he be asked?
Is to basically, yeah, exactly. You know, can you be asked? And little old me was like, yes. So I sat up till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Foxton's alarm clock worked well then.
It did.
Yeah,
It did.
Yeah.
Business plan together. I did a HND in business in the 90s, which mainly consisted of me taking ecstasy and partying all the time. But one thing I did remember to do out the haze of all that was to write a business plan. So I did that, went to see Malcolm, passed it to him. He didn't even open it. He just threw it on his sofa in his office. But what he'd done really cleverly was focus my mind on the numbers and what we wanted to achieve. So he invested in us, and that enabled us to appoint Canberra, who are Candy and Candy's marketing guys, to do all of our
Because a lovely
web
brand
design.
sitting behind you.
So maybe he just spoke to John Hunt, wanted to see if he could get up in the morning. I mean,
What he did
imagine
say-
if you'd overslept, Wilford's wouldn't exist.
No, exactly. Yeah. The alarm clock did work.
Yes,
You're right.
yeah.
And yeah, then we bought the Walker family out in 2013. We had a really good run. They doubled their money. We wouldn't be here without them. So it was a good.
So they doubled their 400 grand in 2 years.
Yeah, we didn't actually draw down the full 400. So
Because
actually,
you didn't need double, after all.
sorry,
You didn't need the double that
we
was...
didn't actually. No,
Yeah.
we needed more than I initially thought, but we didn't need
But not
as much,
quite 100%.
which is a bit
more.
annoying
Yeah.
because
Still good advice.
Still good advice,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Good to know you've got contingency rather than thinking in 3 months we're out
And
of
that
dough.
was Malcolm's response when I went back and went, can we renegotiate the shareholding? And he was like, no.
Yeah.
That comfort's worth quite a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then here we are. So yeah, we're about to double the number of retail units this year. So we're going to go from 2 to 4. We've got 17 members of staff. That's soon going to go up to realistically about 25. So yeah, it's exciting.
You mentioned earlier you now get up at 4:30 in the morning and everything.
Most mornings, yeah,
So what do you do? Is that your fitness regime, or how do you spend the first?
Yeah, it sounds really like woo-woo, but I do a bit of meditation in the morning because my brain is so busy. I'm
It's
kind
all
of
part of the 5 a.m. club.
5 a.m.
type
club.
rituals.
Yeah, love going to the gym. One of those fortunate people that genuinely likes going to the gym. So do that every morning. And have a daughter from a previous relationship who lives in Wales. So I drive to Wales every week. I've got a house in Wales to facilitate seeing Clementine, my daughter. So I basically have to cram in those extra hours to make up for me whizzing
So are
over to
you on the
Wales.
tools still? Are you valuing or presumably not?
Yeah, no,
You
I am.
still- you
Yeah,
still
I
value?
am. I took myself on a business growth program at Cranfield Management School
Yeah.
up in Bedfordshire last year. And they said, you've got to move away from the coalface. And I'm trying, but I just
But you're still keeping your hand
I just
in.
love selling houses.
Can I ask you a really crass question?
Yeah, I do.
How much money do you make?
It depends what year we're talking about. At the moment, Simon and I aren't paying ourselves what we're worth because we're piling it all back into the business with the growth plan. So we just take out what we need. We sold our house, my wife and I, in October just to get rid of the mortgage. So that noose has been lifted, and we traded from a 4-bedroom house down to a 2-bedroom house. I read a really interesting book called The Psychology of Money. It's in the top 10 business books at the moment. And it basically said, in a nutshell, I mean, you don't need to read it. I'll just tell you what it says. Just stop being a dick with money. You know, just stop over leveraging, stop trying to keep up with the Joneses, stop, and all the stuff that I basically have done for the last, all of my professional career. So I've traded in the RS6 and got a really boring 5 Series BMW because I'm trugging to Wales and back.
Yeah.
And obviously I was burning through an awful lot of cash with my RS6.
10 to the gallon and depreciation on a
And
big
now,
car.
I mean, I'm thinking, how much money have I wasted? A bit like with renting that place in Goldeneye. Guy Gittings was like, "Are you what? Why?"
Yeah. I'll have to Google that. I'll have to Google that
But
one,
you've
aren't
still
we?
got to live your life, right?
No, there is
It's
that.
not just about the destination.
There
I
is
mean, it's
that.
like holidays. I mean, to me, it's part of the experience is the travelling there, the kind of
It's- I
the in the
think-
moment stuff.
I think you're right, Russell, but it's all about sort of that balance. And for me, I was quite renowned for being a bit of a showman and sort of, and then I came back from Barbados and all that money I'd earned, I didn't have anything to show for it whatsoever. So I think I finally financially, honestly, reading that book, not this new year, but the year before, has completely changed my philosophy on
Very good.
money. So I know that's a long-winded way of not answering your question, but
I'm quite fascinated about partnerships because I know a lot of people who own businesses as partners, and one partner has a certain skill set, the other has the other skill set. One's doing the money, one's doing the motivation. There's good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
So how does your partnership work with Simon?
Yeah, Simon and I really are sort of poles apart. But we're very I'm the yin to his yang, and vice versa. He runs the letting side of the business. I run the sales side of the business. He's very cautious. He's Captain Cautious. He is very good at conserving money. Up until I read that book, I was very good at throwing money around all over the place. So he would kind of pull me back. And as Mornay knows, who's sitting in the corner, he's
Not
just
because he'd be naughty.
Well, not yet today.
He's just a really reliable business partner. And yeah, we complement each other
Are you
very
mates?
well. We are good mates. Yeah. And we were peripheral mates before we went into business together. So I think that's kind of helped. Neither of us knew it was going to be like entering into a marriage, because we've been 14 years now. We've gone through some amazing times and some really, really tough times. If somebody had said to me after about 9 months of setting the business up, here's your money back, you can now swim safely back to shore, give Malcolm back his 400 grand. I was at the point where I was drowning. Mm-hmm. So I probably would have swam back. Thank God I didn't. And we kept going. And we sold a penthouse and we got paid 80 grand, and that just kicked it all into.
Sorry, Russell, one before we just go there, because I'm going to stay on the estatesy theme, because Russell's second favourite subject is the portals. So as a business owner, selling houses, marketing property in London, where do you see the on the market? Because you were having a bit of a rant about this just last week.
I am writing an opinion piece as we speak.
Yeah,
Are you? Okay.
About on the market, about Rightmove, about Zoopla, where social media comes in. Where are you in that space at the moment?
I can see, not now, but sort of in the medium to long term, I can see the portals being taken out by social channels at some point, but not for quite a long time. We do get an awful lot of leads through from Rightmove, followed by Zoopla, and then on the market. To be honest with you, we hardly get anything from them at all. We're on all three, rightly or wrongly. But, we do sell an awful lot of our properties off market, by which I mean it doesn't leave any online footprint. So we just use social channels and we just use our, classic picking up the phone and talking to people.
So I was reading in the States that Zillow now is saying if the first online footprint is not with Zillow, they will not let that property list on Zillow because of the way AI is changing the way people search.
Okay.
So find me a 4-bed detached
It
house
also mirrors the way that on the market were conceived by Kevin Springett, and that didn't go very well. So I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. Although AI, yes, in terms of trying to trawl and drag data, that they've got a point, but that's very good for them. It might not be very good for the industry or the consumer.
Well, we're lucky in
something
London.
to be aware of, though, isn't it? What's going on over?
We're lucky in London because we've got Lonres.
Yeah.
And obviously, anyone who's anyone in central London is on Lonres. I've been an agent for 27 years, so we've got those long-standing relationships with all the buying agents. So it's not easy to do an off-market transaction, but we're well versed in doing it. We've sold a couple of houses in Barnes. We don't have an office in Barnes. We sold a house recently on Castle now off-market for £6 million, and that's mainly through just picking up the phone and talking to people.
Have you kept the Foxtons 2.5%?
We try. Our average fee is 2%. So it's, I went from the school of Foxtons where you couldn't negotiate. In Fulham, it was 2.25%, take it or leave it. So that sort of grounding that we had at Foxtons is very much in our DNA. But to be competitive south of the river, sadly, we do have to from time to time.
Let's
come down a bit on that.
Let's throw some quick fire stuff at you.
Okay, go.
Who's the person on the planet, apart from the obvious, maybe Clementine and Simon, that you admire the most, and who's been the biggest influence? They might not be the same person, by the way.
That I admire, apart from sort of family members. I mean, Malcolm Walker's been a big influence in my life, as I mentioned earlier. We wouldn't be here without him. My brother-in-law is brilliant. He is a phenomenal businessman. He used to be well, he still works in the golf industry. So he used to work for TaylorMade, very senior out in Carlsbad.
Is he a bit of a mentor?
He's a bit of a mentor. And then talking of mentors, Robin Patterson, I hung on to his coattails for 3 years. He was 53 at the time. I was 30. And he's a very good friend of mine. He came to our wedding.
Yeah.
I learned I was very, very lucky to just be sitting in a room with him for 3 years.
To watch him and kind of
Oh, it's
for it to rub
amazing.
off.
I mean, a lot of my patter is regurgitated Patterson.
Okay, so next one, biggest regret.
Not putting more money on Leicester City when I put a few quid on them to win.
What, the Premiership?
Win the Premiership, yeah.
I'm a Leicester lad.
How are they doing now?
Yeah, I know. It's woeful. But back then, I was very lucky. Actually, I put 50 quid on
At the beginning of the season?
1,000 to 1, not the famous 5,000 to 1.
Yeah.
So I won 50 grand from a £50 football
Did
bet.
you?
Wow.
Yeah, very lucky.
Wow.
Which afforded me the opportunity to buy a little house in Newport.
Well, maybe not so much lucky, but you obviously had a passion
We're
and a
lucky not
belief.
to have you in your Leicester City pants then, like Gary
Oh, yeah,
Lineker,
full
you
kit
know.
wanker.
Yeah. And one more. It's a bit of a cliche question, but I think it's always valid and interesting. What advice would you give the young Geoff now?
Believe in yourself a bit more. Suffered from imposter syndrome my entire life, which I think is a good thing, because
A bit of doubt rather than
bit
cockiness.
of doubt, yeah. I mean, there's a fine line, right, between confidence and arrogance, and I definitely, like a lot of the young guys and girls at Foxtons, we kind of we struggle to be on the right side of that in our 20s, all whizzing around in our convertible M3s. But yeah, just believe in yourself a bit more, and stop caring what people think. I used to care too much about what people think, and as I approach 50, I'm getting to the point, as you can probably tell from this podcast, that I'm now beyond caring what people think.
You'd
Good for
probably
you.
give your younger self a book to read.
Yeah, the psychology of money.
Yes.
Yes, I would, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating, Geoff. Thank you for being so open. Thank you for
having me.
telling us about your story. I'm sure people are going to get an awful lot from listening to how you started the business, clinging on to those inspirational people, and not being afraid to ask for that help and investment if you want it. So if people want to get in touch with you, LinkedIn or
LinkedIn, or just have a look on our website, wilfords.com. Go to our team, and all my numbers are on there. WhatsApp me, email me.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Another property entrepreneur,
Yes,
made good
yeah.
despite challenge.
With a knockback. Well, I'm off to Google Goldeneye and see what that villa looked like and find out a little bit more
Well,
about that.
talking of Google,
Yes.
we've got someone that relates to Google as our next guest.
You have.
But all will be revealed in the next episode.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Geoff.
Cheers.
So that's it. Episode 36, episode 37 coming up. If you've enjoyed it, please click the like, click the follow, click the subscribe buttons. That's just 3 buttons, which will just help us to keep this podcast going up the charts. And we thank you so much for listening. So it's just for me to say it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.